And we don't know how many lives she saved because she did that. And that's all any of us can do. God didn't make extraordinary people. Some people just choose extraordinary journeys. And that's what it's about too. Kristen lived an extraordinary journey. In spite of what she went through, she was still trying to help those around her. And it's funny because when Jesus was asked about religion, he told a simple story that even little children understand. The parable of the Good Samaritan. And you all know that story, but in that story a person was beat up and left beside the road to die. And two people walked by. Too busy, didn't want to get involved, for whatever reason didn't stop. And the third one stopped and bandaged the person, took him to an inn, and said to the innkeeper, I've got to be on my way, but if it costs more, I'll pay for it on the way back. And then Jesus said, who was the religious one? Everybody in this room knows Kristen would have stopped. She would have helped. And we all need to do that. As a mother said to me a few months ago when her son had struggled most of his life, she said, you know, Alan, it's easy to love somebody when they do everything right. But it's more important to love them when they don't. We all need to practice more unconditional love. And that's what she did. Wherever she went, she loved the people around her. And though she was battling her own problems, she still had time for others. And whenever you think of her, you simply do an act of kindness for somebody. Hold a door. Buy somebody a cup of coffee. Drop a donation off at Grace Cafe. Maybe you just changed a life. Maybe that person didn't think that anybody cared. And all of a sudden, somebody took the time. Somebody will remember that song by Harry Chapin called Cats in the Cradle. Come on, Dad, play catch. Well, life is about relationships. And God didn't expect us to be perfect. I often say when somebody tells me their children are perfect, I lock the doors. We're all human. It's the human factor. And when Jesus was asked about heaven, all he said was, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would have told you. I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. And if I prepare a place for you, I'll come and take you to be with me. So the message to all of us, look at, I'm giving you the gift of life. And all I'm asking is that you do the best you can. When you put your head on the pillow at the end of the day, you simply say, I tried my best, I did my best. That's what matters. And the reading that I have chosen, and you'll all know this one, is from Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast. It isn't proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs, it does not delight in evil, but it rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. But love is forever. And you know something? Kristen's in your heart. And you carry her in your heart. And you share her with the world. God didn't take her life. God gave her eternal life. You see, life is simply an horizon. A horizon is simply the limit of our sight. We can't see beyond this life. Because if we did, we couldn't get to the destination fast enough. And we'd miss God's journey. We'd miss all of the beautiful things along the way. And there are struggles in life, and that's part of life's experience too. I think that's where you find faith. When you go through those struggles, because you believe you'll come out the other side. You believe you'll get through the storm. And I think that's why people really, the most favorite of all the passages in the Bibles is the 23rd Psalm. Because it says, when we go through the valley of the shadow of death, I will be with you. And today, God is with all of you. And you're here, and that tells the message, yes, you're here because God sent you. And that's so important. But don't grieve for her. She God now. She's at peace. She made a difference, as we all can. You see, we're just ordinary people. But we can choose an extraordinary journey. You know, I go into so many homes and I see that verse, live well, laugh often, love much. Sounds easy, but you have to work at it. And, you know, Helen Keller probably said it best when she said the most beautiful things in the world, they can't be seen, they can't be touched, they must be felt with the heart. And that's where she is, in your heart. And Mother Teresa said you don't have to do great things. But as citizens of this world, you have a responsibility to do small things in a great way. We can all do that. And I have a few speakers that are going to speak now. And at first, I'll get my list. And I'm going to ask Kate to come up.
Good afternoon. The irony of the situation today is not lost on me, that my bipolar friend is the reason that I'm cleaned and dressed and out of the house for the first time in 2 years. I first met Kristen on Canada Day in 2011 at a party that Ed was having. I say that it was a party that Ed was having, although I'm pretty sure that Joanne cleaned the house. And Leo cleaned, dressed, brined, dry rubbed and barbecued the goat, and stayed sober to drive the tractor so that we could go to the Ball Diamond and watch the fireworks. My husband Mike and I were invited to Kristen's book launch, and in spite of needing a hip replacement, Leo was lugging chairs and tables and books, boxes of books to the pavilion, and Joanne was organizing everyone and selling books. And then after the presentations were over, Leo stood by the barbecue and fed 150 people. I was invited to go with Kristen when she was to get the Canadian, the Champion of Mental Health Award from the Canadian Mental Health Association in London, but instead I went to sit with her and Joanne in the hospital because a social worker she'd missed a call from the social worker. The social worker, fearing the worst, called police. The police arrested her and took her to the hospital. So she and Joanne were sitting in a locked cement block room with a vinyl covered foam mat on a metal stretcher and a single chair bolted to the floor. There were notes scratched into the gray paint on the wall from previous patients saying things like, you might as well just kill yourself, they're not going to help you. There was a bathroom down the hall, no door, on a room, stainless steel, no seat either. You either had to hover or sit on the edge of the bowl. We waited for hours, and eventually the psychiatrist came. He was arrogant and perfunctory. He chastised Kristen like a child and said that he wasn't going to let her go home because she had refused to take the medication that they had tried to prescribe her earlier that day. And Kristen explained to him that she wasn't opposed to taking the medication, they had just provided her with the wrong medication and the wrong dose. That she was in the middle of a transition to new medication that her psychiatrist believed would help her, and a transition to new medication is very, very disruptive for the patient, and she didn't want to be derailed again by a new regime on the whim of this man. And he said said that he would look into things and get back to her, and of course he left and nothing happened. And because of that disruption in medication, Kristen was in the hospital for weeks more. Because of that experience at the hospital and others, Kristen decided that she would come up with these, what she called comfort kits, for people like her who end up in the cement lock room with nothing but these messages from other people who are in despair. And she applied for a grant from an organization that supports micro projects from young people. And of course, she needed to buy these things, and Joanne took her shopping. Kristen wrote handwritten notes in all of these boxes, and they included things like crayons, because you're not allowed a pen or a pencil if you're in the locked psych room. Stress balls, you know, that you could throw at the wall, or a psychiatrist. Anyway, Joanne helped her assemble these things and deliver them. At King's College, Kristen had a class on social change, and the class, each person in the class was to make a pitch to their classmates about a worthy group project for the term. Kristen's presentation on mental health care for young people won over her class, and that became the class project. They wanted to do something about the inadequacies of mental health care for young people, including the reality that if you are a young person in Ontario and you get diagnosed with a mental health problem, you will wait more than a year before you see a psychiatrist, before care begins. Kristen frequently was told by her teachers about her excellent work, and I read notes from her professors about how her assignments and her work was among the best that they had ever seen. So Kristen had a phenomenal support from Leo and Joanne. She had the respect of her peers and her teachers. She had smarts and she had potential, and it was not enough to make up for her suffering. And that tells me that we all need to do better, because otherwise there'll be too many holes in our social fabric, and more people like Kristen will fall through them. There are more Kristens out there. I heard an interview on the CBC just this week from a family doctor in Ontario who said that when he started his practice 20 years ago, he would get 2 mental health visits a month from his patients. And now he gets more than 2 a week. And he's ill-equipped to deal with these, and there are no forward services to which to refer people. Our homeless crisis in Ontario, in Canada, is largely a mental health crisis. 80% of the people who are homeless on our streets are mentally ill, and of them, 100% of them are drug addicted. And this happens because when you're a psych patient and you get released into the community, you're not embraced by the community. There's still a lot of stigma about mental health, and there's a lot of mockery and humiliation involved in mental health, and so these people are isolated and alone, and then when the drug dealer comes to make friends with them, that's where their downfall begins. It's not just up to governments and agencies to make a difference. It's up to all of us. And I know a lot of you have already done what you could for Kristen and others. But Kristen was somebody who believed that every problem had a solution. And when she saw a problem, she worked on a solution. And so I want to share with you today some of the things that Kristen taught me. One of them was, if not me, who? So when there's a problem and you find a solution, you're the person to do it. A lot of the things that Kristen lived by, you will see a direct line of learning between Leo and Joanne's example to her, because they did these things for her and she did them for other people. But if not me, who? Another thing that I know she learned from Leo and Joanne is that dedication is measured in service. That if you see somebody who is passionate about a project, who is working hard on a project, who is expressing to you that something is important to you, to them, then as somebody who cares about them, it becomes important to you, and you roll up your sleeves and you shoulder in. Kristen didn't believe that you should live every day as if it's your last. Kristen told me that her grandmother taught her that you treat every person as if today was their last day. And that means you be kind and you be inclusive. And if you see other people being kind or not inclusive, that you speak up. Kristen did something every day for other people. Not just the people she loved, but people she didn't know. People who reached out to her because she'd written letters to the editor, or she'd been in the news, or she'd been active on social media. People that she just reached out to because she'd read their story and thought what had happened to them was an injustice. And she did something for somebody else every single day. And finally, I ask you to remember Kristen, because it's the only way to honor her legacy and the incredible effort and sacrifice of her grandparents. Thank you.